writes these words for you as they fall from my lips. Think what the strength of my conviction must be when I can find the courage on my own deathbed to darken all your young life at its outset with the shadow of your father's crime. Think, and be warned. Think, and forgive me if you can." There it ended. Those were the father's last words to the son. Inexorably faithful to his forced duty, Mr. Neal laid aside the pen and read over aloud the lines he had just written. "Is there more to add?" he asked, with his pitilessly steady voice. There was no more to add. Mr. Neal folded the manuscript, enclosed it in a sheet of paper, and sealed it with Mr. Armadale's own seal. "The address," he said, with his merciless business formality. "To Allan Armadale, Junior," he wrote, as the words were dictated from the bed, "care of Godfrey Hammick, Esquire, offices of Messrs. Hammick and Ridge, Lincoln's Inn Fields, London." Having written the address, he waited, and considered for a moment. "Is your executor to open this?" he asked. "No, no. He is to give it to my son when my son is of an age to understand it." "In that case," pursued Mr. Neal, with all his wits in remorseless working order, "I will add a dated note to the address, repeating your own words as you have just spoken them, and explaining the circumstances under which my handwriting appears on the document." He wrote the note in the briefest and plainest terms, read it over aloud as he had read over what went before, signed his name and address at the end, and made the doctor sign next as witness of the proceedings, and as medical evidence of the condition in which Mr. Armadale then lay. This done, he placed the letter in a second enclosure, sealed it as before, and directed it to Mr. Hammick, with the superscription of "Private" added to the address. "Do you insist on my posting this?" he asked, rising with the letter in his hand. "Give him time to think," said the doctor. "For the child's sake, give him time to think. A minute may change him." "I will give him 5 minutes," answered Mr. Neal, placing his watch on the table, implacably just to the very last. They waited, both looking attentively at Mr. Armadale. The signs of change which had appeared in him already were multiplying fast. The movement which continued mental agitation had communicated to the muscles of his face was beginning, under the same dangerous influence, to spread downwards. His once helpless hands lay still no longer. They struggled pitiably on the bedclothes. At sight of that warning token, the doctor turned with a gesture of alarm and beckoned Mr. Neal to come nearer. "Put the question at once," he said. "If you let the 5 minutes pass, you may be too late." Mr. Neal approached the bed. He, too, noticed the movement of the hands. "Is that a bad sign?" he asked. The doctor bent his head gravely. "Put your question at once," he repeated, "or you may be too late." Mr. Neal held the letter before the eyes of the dying man. "Do you know what this is?" "My letter." "Do you insist on my posting it?" He mastered his failing speech for the last time, and gave the answer, "Yes." Mr. Neal moved to the door with the letter in his hand. The German followed him a few steps, opened his lips to plead for a longer delay, met the Scotchman's inexorable eye, and drew back again in silence. The door closed and parted them, without a word having passed on either side. The doctor went back to the bed and whispered to the sinking man, "Let me call him back. There is time to stop him yet." It was useless. No answer came. Nothing showed that he heeded or even heard. His eyes wandered from the child, rested for a moment on his own struggling hand, and looked up entreatingly in the compassionate face that bent over him. The doctor lifted the hand, paused, followed the father's longing eyes back to the child, and, interpreting his last wish, moved the hand gently towards the boy's head. The hand touched it and trembled violently. In another instant the trembling seized on the arm and spread over the whole upper part of the body. The face turned from pale to red, from red to purple, and from purple to pale again. Then the toiling hands lay still, and the shifting colour changed no more. The window of the next room was open when the doctor entered it from the death chamber, with the child in his arms. He looked out as he passed by, and saw Mr. Neal in the street below, slowly returning to the inn. "Where is the letter?" he asked. 3 words sufficed for the Scotchman's answer: "In the post." End of the prologue.